The council chamber of Galactic Command rose like a citadel of glass and steel, its vaulted ceiling reflecting 1,000 fractured colors. Every empire had its banner etched into the walls, a reminder of their dominion. Humanity's emblem, still new and unfamiliar, occupied a place near the margins, as though a guest tolerated but not embraced. Ambassador Reyes stood beneath it with her hands clasped tightly, her face composed in the still mask of diplomacy. She knew they had not gathered to hear Earth's voice. They had gathered to mock it. Colonel Marcus Hale stood at her side, shoulders squared, the faint line of an old scar tracing his jaw. He wore the weight of his years like armor. His silence spoke more than words, a silence carved from campaigns fought in deserts and ruins before humanity ever joined the stars. On Reyes's other side sat Lieutenant Aria Voss, younger by decades, eyes alert, recording every flicker of derision in the room. She was not yet seasoned, but her curiosity burned with intensity, and she understood enough to recognize the danger of perception. The presiding figure slithered forward, Admiral Truin of the Veiled Dominion. His scales gleamed obsidian under the chamber's light, and his voice carried the confident resonance of one who had never been contradicted. "Delegates," he began, "we meet to discuss the failures along the rimward expanse. Losses mount, and inefficiency must be culled. In my review of tactical submissions, I encountered something that can only be described as archaic." He paused, his eyes sliding toward the humans. "Snipers." Laughter rippled through the chamber. Clicking mandibles, hissing throats, metallic reverberations of creatures who had never hidden in mud or waited days for a shot. Truin raised a clawed hand to command silence, though amusement still twitched across his lips. Imagine it. In this age of orbital lances and autonomous warships, humans clinging to rifles, peering through scopes as if patience and powder could turn the tide of war. Charming, quaint, and hopelessly obsolete. Reyes's heart pounded, but her expression remained calm. She forced her breath to steady, though she felt the heat of humiliation searing her chest. Hale did not flinch, though his jaw tightened. Aria, unable to disguise her reaction, glanced sharply at the Admiral, her young face betraying indignation. Truin leaned forward, savoring the moment. "Perhaps next we shall hear of cavalry charges? Of sharpened sticks? Humanity clings to relics, and relics have no place in modern war." The chamber erupted again, voices layered in derision. To them, Earth's traditions were curiosities, museum pieces displayed for entertainment. Reyes raised her hand for attention, and against the tide of dismissal, her voice rang clear. "You misunderstand. Snipers are not relics. They are precision incarnate. They embody patience, discipline, and the certainty of action. A single shot, delivered at the right moment, can alter the fate of battles and nations. You may mock symbols, Admiral, but results are what matter. And snipers deliver results." A few delegates tilted their heads, perhaps intrigued. Most dismissed her defense with casual disdain. Truin flicked his tail and turned his gaze to Hale. "And you, Colonel? You led such hunters, did you not? Enlighten us. What glory lies in crawling through mud when fleets decide wars?" Hale rose with deliberate calm. His voice carried the weight of memory, gravelly yet steady. "I'll tell you what a sniper is. A sniper is a promise. A reminder that no matter how vast your fleet, no matter how advanced your machines, there is always one human waiting unseen, watching, patient, and when a moment comes, decisive. You measure power in tonnage. We measure it in resolve." The laughter faltered. For a heartbeat, silence settled, but Truin recovered quickly, baring fangs in a cold smile. "Fine words, Colonel. Yet words will not stop orbital fire. Perhaps one day, you will prove them on the field." The session moved on to other matters, but the sting lingered. Reyes sat rigid, masking fury behind diplomacy. Hale remained expressionless, though his eyes betrayed simmering defiance. Aria absorbed everything, filing away each insult with the hunger of one who wished to transform outrage into action. When the chamber emptied, The humans walked in silence through corridors lined with banners. At last Aria spoke, her voice hushed but sharp. They don't understand. They think invisibility comes from machines, precision from programming. They've never felt the dread of being hunted by something alive. Hale glanced at her, measuring. He saw not naivety, but clarity forming in her young face. They'll learn, he said simply. Reyes halted at a junction, turning toward them. Her diplomat's poise cracked just enough to reveal her anger. We cannot endure this mockery forever. If we remain silent, they will dismiss us as children. If we lash out, we risk exile. What proof can we offer that cannot be denied? Hale's reply came without hesitation. Proof written on the battlefield, not in speeches, not in chambers, in results. They entered their quarters, walls plain compared to the grandeur outside. Guards stood indifferent, alien eyes flickering with faint amusement. Once the door sealed, Hale removed his jacket and placed it neatly aside, a ritual of preparation. His voice dropped into gravity. I've served with people who disappeared in plain sight. They were more than marksmen. They were ghosts. No sensor could catch them. No machine could replicate their patience. And when they returned, the battlefield was never the same. Reyes studied him carefully. Are you suggesting we resurrect the Legion? I'm saying they should never have been disbanded, Hale answered. His eyes carried the certainty of someone who had seen fear etched on enemy faces. The name lingered like smoke, Ghost Legionnaires. To some myth, to others, a footnote in sealed records. But to Hale, they were flesh and blood, soldiers who made silence louder than thunder. Aria shivered at the sound of the name. She had read the files, stories of units who vanished into wilderness and reappeared only when victory was assured. She had dismissed them as embellishment. Yet Hale spoke with conviction that stripped away doubt. Reyes tapped her fingers against the table, weighing risk against necessity. To act would defy precedent, would draw ire if discovered. But the memory of truants' laughter burned hotter than caution. If we call them, she said slowly, it must be decisive. Half measures will only confirm their ridicule. Then don't take half measures, Hale replied. Call them. Set them loose. Let the galaxy laugh now. Soon they won't. Aria leaned forward, her voice soft yet resolute. If the Ghost Legionnaires step onto the field, the Council will have no choice but to acknowledge us. But are we ready for what it costs to unleash them? For a long moment, silence bound them together. Then Reyes exhaled, the sound of decision settling like iron. Very well. We begin tonight. Quietly, invisibly. If we succeed, humanity will no longer be dismissed. The low hum of the station filled the pause. Hale's lips curved into the faintest smile, the first she had seen since the chamber. Then it begins. We've lived in their shadow long enough. Now let's remind them what hunts in the dark. Aria felt anticipation coil within her chest. The galaxy had mocked them. Soon, the ghosts of Earth would answer. The transport ship cut through the void like a silent spear, its hull coated in matte alloys that absorbed more light than they reflected. Inside its steel womb, the chosen soldiers of Earth sat in rows, each silent, each carrying the weight of expectation and disbelief. They had been summoned not by open proclamation, but by encrypted orders delivered in fragments. Whispers passed through trusted channels. To most of the galaxy, they did not exist. To themselves, they were a brotherhood reborn, an old name carried into a new era, the Ghost Legionnaires. Colonel Hale walked the aisle between them, boots echoing faintly against the deck. He studied each face with the calm scrutiny of a sculptor examining his work. There was Ibrahim Khaled, once a desert marksman who could wait 3 days beneath scorching suns without food or water for the perfect shot. There was Mei Lian, hunter from the mountain ranges of Yunnan, her eyes sharp as flint, her breathing perpetually measured. And there was Gabriel North, a veteran sniper whose reputation stretched from ruined cities to frozen tundras, his silence more commanding than words. Each bore scars, not only of flesh but of memory, and each had accepted the summons without hesitation. At the rear, Lieutenant Aria Voss observed quietly. She was younger than most, her experience drawn more from simulations and tactical planning than battlefield scars. Yet Hale had insisted she come. He wanted her to see the Legion not as legend, but as living proof of humanity's unyielding art. Aria felt their gazes weigh on her, testing if she was worthy to stand among them. She held her posture firm, masking uncertainty beneath discipline. The ship's lights dimmed, and a holographic projection shimmered to life above the central console. Ambassador Reyes appeared, her expression taut, her words clipped. The Council watches us closely. They expect failure, or at best an amusing spectacle. We cannot afford either. Your mission is to deploy on Carthos 4, a world the Galactic Command has struggled to pacify. Enemy forces are entrenched, sensors dominate the terrain, and previous assaults have collapsed under withering fire. They believe no subtlety remains possible. Hale stepped forward, and that is precisely why we will succeed. Subtlety is not in their machines, it's in us. A murmur passed through the Legionnaires, not of doubt, but of anticipation. For them, the battlefield was not merely terrain to conquer. It was canvas, and their rifles the brushes with which they would paint inevitability. The projection flickered and vanished, leaving only the steady thrum of the ship's engines. Hale addressed his soldiers directly. You've heard their laughter. You know what they think of us, primitive, obsolete, relics clinging to steel and powder. Let them believe it. When we step onto that field, every pull of a trigger will rewrite their mockery into silence. You're not here to prove sniping exists. You are here to remind the galaxy that humans can disappear in a shadow and return only when death demands. Hours later, the ship descended into Carthos IV's upper atmosphere. The world below stretched wide, a tapestry of jagged mountains and broken cities, its skies veiled by clouds thick with ash. Enemy forces, an insurgent coalition resistant even to orbital suppression, had carved fortresses into canyons and ridgelines. Galactic fleets had rained fire upon them, yet they endured, sheltered by terrain and cunning. The Legionnaires saw not hopelessness but opportunity. Deployment was swift. Pods dropped them into scattered zones across the range, each soldier landing alone, separated by kilometers of wilderness. They did not complain nor question. Ghosts worked best when isolated, bound not by constant chatter, but by shared instinct. Their equipment, though modest by galactic standards, had been refined for silence. Rifles adapted to variable gravities, cloaks that bent not light but perception, and comm systems that whispered only when necessary. Aria's pod struck the ground with a jolt that rattled her bones. She emerged into a forest of blackened trees, their branches skeletal against the dim sky. Adjusting her gear, she scanned the horizon, steadying her breath. She was no sniper, but Hale had placed her here to observe, to learn the heartbeat of ghost warfare. The forest answered with silence, broken only by the rustle of wind. For the first time, she understood the weight of patience, the art of waiting not minutes, but days for a single perfect strike. Hale, positioned high along a ridge, surveyed the valley below. Through his scope, he saw enemy convoys weaving along narrow trails, soldiers confident in the protection of their scanners. He smiled faintly, knowing those scanners would fail. Already Khaled had found a perch among shattered boulders, his breathing so controlled it merged with the earth. Mei Yin crawled along a slope, her camouflage so perfect even the dust clung to her like kin. North, as always, had simply vanished. Hale did not bother to search for him. Night fell. The first kill came without announcement. A commander in the enemy camp, armored and surrounded, collapsed with a hole through his helm. No alarm triggered. Sensors found nothing. Another fell, then another, each strike separated by silence long enough to unnerve, short enough to sow panic. By dawn, the enemy had begun firing into shadows, convinced they were surrounded by legions rather than a handful of unseen hunters. Aria recorded everything, her heart racing as she realized the truth. These soldiers did not fight with superior technology, but with a mastery of fear itself. They weaponized patience, turning the enemy's confidence into terror. She remembered Truan's laughter in the council chamber and felt satisfaction bloom. If he could see this, the laughter would have died in his throat. As the operation unfolded, the Legionnaires remained unseen. Their rifles whispered, their movements blended with terrain, their presence reduced to a rumor that spread like wildfire. Enemy morale fractured, positions abandoned, entire units retreating into the wilderness rather than face a foe they could not comprehend. What orbital lances could not accomplish, the silence of human resolve achieved in a single night. At dawn, Hale gathered Aria on the ridge. Smoke rose from abandoned camps, and the valley lay eerily still. He looked tired, older than the night before, but his eyes burned with quiet triumph. "Do you understand now?" he asked. Aria nodded slowly. "It's not just shooting. It's rewriting the enemy's mind, making them believe they're already defeated." Hale placed a hand on her shoulder, firm yet not unkind. "That's what the Council will never grasp until they see it. And soon they will." Their comms crackled briefly with a coded signal. Confirmation from Reyes. The Council chamber awaited reports, expecting failure, prepared to sneer once more. Hale allowed himself a thin smile. Let them wait. Let them think the ghosts had vanished without trace. Soon enough, the field would speak louder than any defense Reyes could deliver. As the wind swept through the ravaged valley, Aria felt the weight of history shifting. The Ghost Legionnaires had returned, not as relics, but as proof. And somewhere beyond the stars, laughter still echoed, unaware it would soon be silenced forever. The valley of Cartos forelay hushed beneath a heavy sky, its silence broken only by the distant thrum of engines. The insurgent coalition had begun to react, though their response carried the scent of desperation. Convoys rerouted, commanders barked orders, and squads swept the ridges with weapons raised, but their movements betrayed fear rather than confidence. Hale watched it all through the glass of his scope, every twitch and stagger magnified. He could sense the rhythm of panic spreading like cracks in frozen water. Across the scattered terrain, the Ghost Legionnaires operated with seamless autonomy. Khaled waited prone upon a ledge where the rocks hid his silhouette, patient as stone. His crosshairs hovered over a comms officer who clutched at static-filled equipment, trying to summon reinforcements. One exhale, one heartbeat, one whisper of a trigger, and the officer collapsed. Khaled's face remained expressionless as he eased back into the shadows, erasing his presence before the corpse hit the ground. Mei Lian crawled through a ravine where mist clung low. She moved with a predator's grace, inch by inch, her cloak blending with stone and vapor. Ahead, a squad clustered near a heat emitter, their scanners sweeping in vein arcs. She sighted the squad leader and waited, muscles still, mind emptied of everything but the cadence of breath. When the shot cracked, it was less a sound than an exhalation, the leader falling silently into the mist. The squad scattered, firing blindly, and May slipped away, already seeking her next vantage. Aria Voss observed from her perch, recording data, her heart quickening with each strike. She had studied theory, morale collapse, asymmetric engagements, the psychology of unseen warfare, but witnessing it unfold was something else entirely. She felt awe and unease intertwine, for what inspired her also unsettled her. These soldiers did not merely fight. They dismantled the will of their enemies, thread by thread. And yet, watching them vanish into terrain, she realized how fragile their humanity appeared, consumed by roles that demanded they become shadows. Gabriel North remained unseen even to his allies. Reports of kills came tagged with his identifier, but no one spotted him, not even in brief glimpses. It was said he preferred solitude, so absolute that even comms felt intrusive. Some whispered he embodied the essence of the Legion more than anyone else. Not a man, but a phantom wearing human skin. Hale trusted him without question, for when North committed to a field, results followed like gravity. The insurgents retaliated with increasing aggression. Drones fanned out, buzzing like angry insects scanning for heat signatures. Gunships prowled the skies, their engines rattling mountainsides. Yet their advanced technology faltered, confused by decoys the Legion planted, misled by false heat sources, blinded by reflective shards scattered like breadcrumbs. Hale coordinated little. Coordination was unnecessary. Each sniper acted according to instinct refined by endless training, bound together not by orders, but by shared understanding. At dawn, the enemy attempted a counteroffensive, pouring forces into the valley with heavy vehicles. Dust rose in thick columns, engines roaring to project confidence they did not feel. Hale tracked the lead vehicle, a command carrier armored against artillery, but blind to what lay beyond its sensors. He calculated wind, distance, and atmospheric distortion, then squeezed the trigger. The round pierced the viewport, and the vehicle ground to a halt, confusion erupting in its wake. Panic rippled outward. Vehicles collided, soldiers stumbled over one another, and what began as advance collapsed into chaos. From her position, Aria whispered into her recorder, "This is not combat, as the galaxy knows it. This is fear incarnate, stretched over miles, wearing a human face only long enough to vanish again." She stopped, realizing she spoke more to herself than to the device. The insurgent coalition had prided itself on resilience, but resilience crumbled when leaders fell unseen, when every open step invited death. By nightfall, half their camps lay abandoned, smoldering fires left untended. Survivors whispered of cursed terrain, of enemies who walked between shadows. Some fired on their own allies in confusion, mistaking movement for ghosts. Yet for all their success, the Legionnaires felt strain. Khaled's hands trembled slightly as he reloaded, a fatigue born not of exertion, but of relentless stillness. May's eyes stung from hours of unbroken focus, her muscles rigid with tension. Aria sensed it too, the thin line between mastery and self-destruction. To become a ghost demanded surrendering pieces of humanity, and the question lingered of how much one could surrender before nothing remained. On the third night, Hale gathered Aria at a concealed outpost. He offered her ration packs she barely touched, her mind too restless to eat. "They're breaking," she said, staring at the smoldering valley below. "They're cracking," Hale corrected. His tone carried no triumph, only certainty. "Breaking is final. Cracking means they may still harden again. We cannot relent until they collapse completely." She studied him, noting the exhaustion etched into his face, yet also the fire that refused to dim. "Why you? Why this burden?" He considered before answering. "Because someone has to carry it, and because I've seen what happens when humans let others define their worth. The Council will not remember speeches. They will remember this valley and what we do here." Their conversation ended when the comms crackled faintly. A coded signal arrived. Enemy reinforcements were inbound, larger and better equipped. The coalition had called in reserves from hidden strongholds. Aria tensed, but Hale's expression hardened into focus. "Good," he muttered. "The bigger they come, the louder their fall." When dawn broke again, the reinforcements marched with banners raised, their numbers filling the horizon. Yet within the first hour, commanders toppled. Gunship pilots were plucked from skies they thought secure. Communications fell silent, not from jamming, but from bullets placed with surgical precision. The larger the force, the more vulnerable its parts became, and the Legion exploited every seam. Aria witnessed soldiers abandoning their posts, leaders deserting units, cohesion unraveling into rout. She marveled at how a handful of humans had undone an army not with overwhelming power, but with the weight of silence and dread. The contrast between the grand technology of the galaxy and the patient will of Earth's ghosts became undeniable. By the end of the day, the valley belonged not to the insurgents, but to the shadows that haunted them. Fires smoldered, vehicles lay abandoned, and the once defiant coalition scattered into wilderness. The Legionnaires emerged not triumphantly, but carefully, ghosts stepping back into the flesh of soldiers, each carrying the quiet toll of what they had wrought. Hale gathered them beneath the fading sun. His voice was steady, though the lines of fatigue deepened across his face. "We are not finished. The Council still laughs beyond these stars. But now we hold proof. Proof bought not by speeches, but by shadows and patience. When the reports reach them, they will see." Aria looked at the faces around her, scarred, weary, yet resolute. She understood then that humanity's strength did not lie in overwhelming numbers or dazzling machines. It lay in stubborn will, in the refusal to vanish even when the galaxy demanded irrelevance. The Ghost Legionnaires had not only taken the field, they had redefined it. The wind carried smoke across the ridge as Hale gave the order to vanish once more. And as the soldiers dissolved back into the landscape, Aria felt the inevitable pull of destiny. The galaxy's laughter would end, but the cost of silence was only beginning to reveal itself. The council chamber gleamed with sterile brilliance, its towering walls reflecting the assembled delegates like a hall of mirrors. Dozens of species had gathered, their voices humming in low conversation as the session convened. Reports from Cardhose 4 had arrived hours earlier, fragmented and unbelievable. Entire enemy battalions routed, fortified positions abandoned, insurgents scattering into wilderness. Galactic Command had anticipated another failure, another humiliating display of humanity's quaint methods. Instead, they were faced with an enigma. Victory achieved without fleets, without orbital strikes, without the tools they trusted. Ambassador Reyes stood at her place, her posture sharp, eyes unwavering as the presiding officer, Admiral Truin, called the chamber to order. He looked less certain now, though his serpentine face betrayed little. The laughter that had once filled these halls seemed muted, replaced by uneasy murmurs. "We are gathered to review the events of Cardhose 4, Truin announced. "The battlefield reports are contested. Human forces claim victory, yet the data lacks clarity. Perhaps the ambassador will enlighten us." Reyes inclined her head and began. "Clarity, Admiral, is precisely what you lack. Not because it does not exist, but because you cannot comprehend it. Cardhose 4 has been liberated. The insurgents were undone not by overwhelming firepower, but by the resolve of soldiers you mocked as relics. You laughed at the notion of snipers, of patient hunters, and yet their silence succeeded where your fleets failed. A ripple coursed through the assembly. Some scoffed, others leaned forward with intrigue. Truin's eyes narrowed. "We have records of casualties, yes, but no evidence of the method. What you describe sounds more like myth than strategy." From the shadows near the chamber entrance, Hale stepped forward. He wore his uniform without adornment, his scars more visible than his rank. The chamber quieted as he approached the center, his boots echoing against the polished floor. "You want evidence?" His voice carried a steady weight. "Look to your own soldiers. Ask them what it felt like when commanders fell one by one. Ask them how it feels to fire into shadows, praying you're not already chosen. That is the evidence. Fear itself." Delegates exchanged glances, uneasy. Truin bared his fangs in a semblance of a smile. "Fear is not a weapon. Fear is an affliction of the weak." Hale's gaze did not waver. "Fear is the most reliable weapon. It does not run out of ammunition. It does not require resupply. Once sown, it grows on its own." He turned, scanning the chamber. "You rely on machines to fight for you, to make decisions for you. You've forgotten what it means to be hunted by something alive, something determined. That is what humanity brings. Not numbers, not firepower. Resolve." The silence that followed was profound. For the first time, the chamber felt less like a cathedral of power and more like a court where judgment had shifted. Aria watched from the delegation's seats, her pulse quickening. She had been silent since their return, content to observe, but now she understood why Hale had insisted she come. This was not merely about victory on Cardhose 4. This was about altering perception, redefining humanity's place among the stars. Reyes seized the moment. "You asked for proof. Proof is the absence of resistance on Cardhose 4. Proof is the collapse of a force your fleets could not dislodge. You mocked Earth's traditions. Now you face the reality that those traditions succeed where your arrogance fails. Dismiss our methods if you like, but the results cannot be denied. Delegates murmured louder, some with skepticism, others with grudging respect. A commander of the Threx Dominion leaned forward, mandibles clicking. If such methods are true, they should be studied, perhaps replicated. Mei Lian, who had remained near the chamber's periphery with Khaled and North, finally spoke, her tone measured but firm. You cannot replicate what you do not understand. You cannot program patience. You cannot manufacture instinct. You cannot download the will to wait for days in the dirt, alone, with nothing but your breath and your heartbeat. That is not technology. That is humanity. The word struck deeper than any boast. Even Truan faltered, though he masked it quickly. So you would have us believe that a handful of humans are more dangerous than fleets? Hale answered before anyone else could. Not more dangerous, more decisive. Fleets bombard, armies clash, but sometimes wars are decided by a single shot at the right time. That is what you saw on Cardhost 4. That is what you will see again. The chamber fell silent once more. Delegates shifted uneasily, their eyes betraying a dawning recognition. For all their technology, they had no defense against the invisible, against ghosts. At the session's end, no laughter followed. Instead, whispers trailed the humans as they left the chamber, whispers of fear, respect, and curiosity. The mockery that had once defined them was gone, replaced by something weightier. Later, in the quiet of their quarters, Aria sat with Hale and Reyes. The tension of the day lingered, though victory had been won. Aria broke the silence first. They believe us now, but do they fear us too much? Reyes considered, her diplomat's mind parsing outcomes. Fear is useful. Fear commands respect, but can also isolate. We must tread carefully. Today, they see us as dangerous. Tomorrow, they may see us as indispensable. That is the balance we must hold. Hale leaned back, weary yet resolute. Let them fear. It means they'll remember us. And when the time comes, they'll think twice before underestimating humans again. Khaled polished his rifle in silence. May adjusted her cloak with meticulous care. North, as always, stood apart, his eyes unreadable. They did not need words. Their presence alone carried the truth of what had been accomplished. Aria felt a strange pride settle within her. She had entered this campaign uncertain of her role, doubting her worth among legends. Yet she had witnessed ghosts in motion, had seen patience weaponized and silence sharpened into a blade. She understood now that her task was not merely to observe, but to ensure the galaxy never forgot what humanity had done here. As they prepared for departure, Hale gave a final order, his tone steady but carrying a note of finality. We remain unseen until we must be seen. That is our way. Let the galaxy whisper. Let them wonder. But when we take the field again, it will not be with fanfare. It will be with silence. The Ghost Legionnaires boarded their transport, shadows slipping into steel. The engines roared to life, carrying them back into the void where legends were born. On Cardhost 4, the smoke still rose, testimony to a war fought not with overwhelming power, but with patience and resolve. And in the council's grand halls, the echo of mockery had been replaced by the weight of silence. Silence the galaxy would not soon forget.